Chairman Store of FightHype.com here with Victor Conte. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Glad to be out on the scene for ever since this pandemic and all these economic problems we've had. I'm 73 years old. I've been kind of laying low, and now it's finally time to come back out.
Who are some of the fighters that you've been working with on this card, man? I know it's
on this card.
Yeah.
Well, there will be 5 fighters repping Snack.
Got it.
It's going to be Boo Boo Andre.
I believe Gervonta Davis as well, right?
Well, he's not for this fight. Boots has decided not to. Maybe next time he wants to wear his own logo.
Gotcha.
But at the last minute now, Hector Garcia is going to rep Snack.
Okay.
So we got Hector, we got Boo Boo, we got Conor Davis, and we got Rashidi Ellis.
Nice. It's a nice lineup. I gotta jump on it too, man. But you know, have to know, because you know everything when it comes to you know, people doing the right things to get their body in shape and people doing the wrong things to get their body in shape, man. So have to ask you about the whole Conor Benn situation. How can, because I believe he failed VADA but passed USADA, or the other way around?
It's clomiphene, which is a fertility drug designed for women.
Yeah.
But it's commonly used in boxing. And it's actually used when bodybuilders use steroids. When they come back off, they'll stay on 6 weeks and then come off for a month. When they come off, they use clomiphene to jumpstart their own system, their own endogenous production.
So what happens if you don't use that then?
Well, it takes longer for your hormonal system to communicate, and I've seen guys stay on steroids for 3 months, and 3 months later their testosterone level is still 0. So you can't, the longer you stay on and suppress it, the harder it is to come back.
So I guess in a sense, is it kind of like, you know, somebody's using illegal substances and then, you know, they're trying to kind of cycle off of it, but they have to go on this drug to kind of get their body right first?
Here's what really happens.
Okay.
Probably 80% of the drugs that these boxers take are underground steroid laboratories that are making them. They don't use good quality control. They don't wash their beaks and flasks and glassware that they use to make each batch. So if you're making testosterone and then you don't clean the glassware properly and then you make nandrolone and then you don't clean it properly and you make clomiphene, you're getting trace amounts, and I'm talking 4 or 5 parts per trillion. I mean, ultra trace amounts. But this equipment is so sensitive that it picks it up. So, you know, a lot of times what's on the bottle that you buy may say testosterone, but it will cause a positive test for nandrolone, or it may say something else, but cause a positive test for clomiphene. In any event, it's coming from somewhere you shouldn't be hanging out with. If you're laying down with dogs that got fleas, don't be surprised when you got fleas. So if it is contamination, even that's not a good thing, because that means you've been hanging out with people that are selling contaminated products that will cause positive drug tests.
So let me ask you this. I know it's always hard to kind of say if a guy did it or not, because, you know, we're not there. But like, for example, the case with Canelo and the tainted meat, quote unquote, it did go back and say, okay, it did seem like it was tainted meat because there was such a minuscule amount. With this Conor Benn situation, is there any possible chance of contamination, or there's no way?
The answer is yes. Okay, so they did a big expose with ESPN when Canelo tested positive for clenbuterol. And they interviewed me and Canelo and the rancher. And they eventually went to the restaurant, got the receipts of the beef that they had bought from a slaughterhouse. They went to the slaughterhouse. Then they went even farther. They went and got data from many of the slaughterhouses in Mexico. And what they discovered was 30% of any meat produced in Mexico You walk up to a hamburger stand and buy a hamburger, it'll give you a positive drug test. So, but now you have to look at the concentration and say, well, is it a level of accidental contamination, or is it at a level where it would demonstrate intent to cheat? His levels were really low. So they were very consistent with exposure to contaminated meat. Where he took it one step farther was, and they basically listened to me because I was inquiring about this with the lab in Utah, and it cost about $2,500 to set this up to do a hair test. And then we presented to Canelo, well, you need to do a hair test. And he stepped forward and did the hair test. Now, hair is a very valuable sample because it's like urine, what your body's excreting, but instead of being the previous 24 hours or acute dynamic type of data, you get the long-term historic perspective. So if you have been using it to cheat over a period of time, they can even snip your hair into pieces, and they say, look here, it's higher here, it's higher here, and tell you exactly precisely when you were using it. So maybe you didn't use it recently, but back here you were using a whole shitload of it. The fact that he did that and the results came back consistent with contamination exposure and not with intention to cheat, he's exonerated. So this surprised me, but he did the right thing. Canelo did everything possible to clear his name, and then thereafter he joined VADA 24/7, 365. So you can't, now I'm not going to insinuate here that Canelo's clean. There's plenty of things people can do and not get caught. I'm just saying it was determined that he didn't use clenbuterol with intent to cheat, and that's what he tested positive for. Now, in the case with Conor Benn, I said in the very beginning, I'm the one that introduced this idea that, well, they do find trace amounts in eggs. You can eat eggs. If you eat a lot of eggs, you could get that amount. But they said what you need to do is go back to the store where you bought the eggs that you were buying, have those eggs tested, and see if they were contaminated. Then bring the data in, and then they see this, right? Well, that builds a case for accidental contamination and not intent to cheat. So what that does is it mitigates the punishment. So if he was going to get 2 years, now he'll get 6 months. You understand? But it's on him to bring the evidence. And I basically laid the case out there. If you want to get exonerated, here's how you do it. Let me show you.
And just last thing before we wrap it up, because they're saying we got to go. Gervonta Davis has been making a little bit of accusations saying that Ryan Garcia looks a little bigger, looks like he could be juicing or anything like that. Just the eye test, could you kind of agree with him, or are you kind of saying you don't really know? Like, what's kind of your whole take?
Well, here's what we do know. They don't do effective testing, period. If you want to clear it up, there's plenty of ways to do it. You just hire VADA, and you put the frequency of the testing, samples being collected, and what they test for. There's programs like, I can tell you right now that Caleb Plant and Benitez are in a 12-week program where they're being tested quite frequently. Now, he's a PBC fighter, but he knows to ask for it. The A side can demand it. Now, I can tell you another time when Tank fought Barrios, and then they were tested 3 times, and they weren't tested for the remaining month before the fight, and the managers and people were calling me up saying, what's up with this? Why is there no testing? Because they signed up for a lesser program, So there's different tiers. Do you want the Rolls Royce, you want the Ford, or you want the Volkswagen? You see? So sometimes, and they do it for risk management purposes. Promoters do not want positive drug tests because it costs them money. So they'll either have no drug testing, or they'll put in a little cheap, where they maybe be tested once every 2 or 3 weeks instead of once every week. So you got to know the nuances. What is the actual term and condition and agreement regarding how stringent the testing will be? Makes sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
So I do know that Tank has been tested before, But they complained in that fight, and I know this, that for this fight with Caleb and Benitez over a similar period of time, they'll be tested 8 times. Well, I can tell you this, Tank and Barrios were tested 4 times.
Gotcha. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it, man.